If you will, turn to Proverbs. We're going to start with chapter 9. We'll start off by reading the first 6 verses of Proverbs 9. And I hope I can say this loud enough for you all. In Proverbs 9, beginning in verse 1, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine, and she has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. Now, here in Proverbs chapter 9, starting in verse 1, turn that off. I'm going to go on the side. Were any of you here the day that I was supposed to lead a prayer, and I went up there with my iPad and I bowed my head to lead the prayer, and I said, dear God, sometimes life is hard, and Siri said, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. And so you'll never see me walk up there with an electronic device. And I forgot to put the phone down there. I did not want Siri teaching my lesson for me. Okay. Chapter 9 is the end of a unit. From chapter 1 through chapter 9 is the introduction to Proverbs. This would be the ending of that introduction. After chapter 9, from chapter 10 through 31, what we have are the Proverbs. And those Proverbs are divided up into, depending on how you look at it, probably anywhere from 6 to 13 different types of Proverbs. Some of the Proverbs are just simply statements. If you spend all your money, you're going to be broke. I mean, there's no comparison between rich and poor or anything else. But then there's also a whole series that are about riches, wealth, and poverty. We've been seeing wisdom and folly as we go through these 9 chapters. And so throughout all the Proverbs, you're going to find these different subsets of types of Proverbs. And again, as you read through those, and they're scattered throughout, it's just a good idea. This is where the wisdom comes from studying the scripture. As you read it, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, as you read those, it's the wisdom that helps you understand not only what it's saying, but what you're supposed to do with it. It's one thing to read something, it's something else to, and I'm going to tell you, I used to be an English teacher, and I'd teach students how to write complete sentences. I thought, because I would teach them what a verb is, and then they'd get confused because people would say, I'm going to go Google something. Google's not a verb. Google's a noun. So they would say, what's the verb in that sentence? And they'd say, Google. No. Let's go back and let's review what a noun is, and then we'll talk about what a verb is. So there's the wisdom. What do you do with it? It's one thing to go through it. It's one thing to read it. It's one thing to have somebody tell you about it, but what do you do with it? And that's what the book of Proverbs is going to be about. Let's discuss this just for a couple minutes. What are some of the things that stand out here for you? I'll start. Wisdom has built her house. Now, this is Lady Wisdom that we've been talking about for the last 9 chapters or 8 chapters. So, same person. She's built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. What do you think that means? What does it mean to hew a house?
That would be built.
Build. She built her house. Wasn't something given to her. She made an actual effort to try and build this house. What about the 7 pillars?
I think it implies a firm foundation for a strong structure.
It is. It's a strong structure. It provides a strong foundation, but there's also another significance too. 7, biblically, is a perfect number, and it's that perfection that we're looking at. Her house is not just a house. We're looking at a perfect house. Let's go on. What would be the significance of her slaughtering her beasts?
To feed people.
To feed people. Notice that she didn't feed a beast or slaughter a beast. She slaughtered several beasts. She was expecting more than just a couple people to show up. She wants many to come to her. And it's an expectation. And that's kind of the whole point of the Bible. We want people to come to the Bible to read it. And she's mixed her wine. She has also set her table. So she's made everything perfect. And this is interesting. She sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Why? She wants everybody to hear them. Don't just call, like go down some alley and call where your voice is going to be a funeral voice. Don't have a quiet voice. You want to make sure that you're heard. And everyone in here probably has stood on the top of a mountain somewhere and yelled out so that you can hear it echo throughout the canyons or over against the walls of other mountains and things. So she sent her young women out to call from all those places. Verse 4, whoever is simple. That word in Hebrew, and your Bibles probably tell you that. Does anybody have that in their Bibles? What that word means in Hebrew, what that Hebrew word is?
It says naive.
It's naive. It's P-E-T-I is the Hebrew word. And it actually refers to somebody who's naive, foolish, not able, gullible, somebody who's able to not make a wise distinction of things, a simple person. And some of your versions would say simple, probably. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. In other words, I know you may not be able to make a distinction, but come here. Trust me. I fixed this for you, and it's for you to consume. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. Again, the reference insight is to talk to us about that wisdom that she's trying to bestow on everybody for the last 8 chapters. Going back to the beast thing for a minute. Not everybody had what it took. If you'll remember, there were times when the Jews, for instance, were told that they were to kill a particular animal for a feast. Were there exceptions? Could they substitute a bird for the lamb, for instance? Yes. They realize, God realizes, not everybody has the means to slaughter several beasts, multiple beasts, much less one. And so this is an indicator, again, it's a cultural thing about the wealth. And the wealth is kind of a symbolic thing. It's not just the wealth that she has to be able to provide enough food for all these people. It's symbolic of the wealth, of the knowledge, the wisdom that she's going to be able to provide to everybody. And that's what these parts of these introduction are trying to lead us to. Now, just like every other one in Proverbs, in the last 8 chapters, you have Lady Wisdom, and somebody's going to be invited to Lady Wisdom's house. In this case, we've already determined that her house is solid and strong. In Proverbs 14:1, now again, I'm jumping into the actual Proverbs. It does say, the wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down. Again, another reference as they read through the Proverbs, it's going to be something that's going to be alluding to something that they should have been aware of from those first 9 chapters. This isn't just an idle proverb that was thrown in chapter 14. It has an indication of something they should already know about. The point is that she's able to manage that household. And that's one of those things that we're going to be able to see in the rest of the Proverbs. And by the way, we're not going to do 10 through 31 as soon as I'm done with this chapter. Again, it's what you can do with it. How do you manage that wisdom? How do you manage your house? Your life being that house, what do you do with it? And so we're going to see that if you study the Proverbs, and you're going to find more and more of those references. Wisdom in this case is what's going to sustain your soul. In Deuteronomy 8:3, and you all know this, you probably could quote it without me having it up there. But it's one of those things that from the very beginning, from earlier times, God has said, other men have said. When the Proverbs are written, by that time, this should be another phrase, this should be another verse that comes to their mind. I'm going to make this sound like I always taught a bunch of dummies, but people tend to think of things in units. We have blocks. They make fun of men saying men have different boxes in their head, and they compartmentalize things very well. And you may have seen that YouTube video where the guy compares men's brains are boxes and women's brains are spaghetti, because in this video he's trying to explain that women have all kinds of connections, and they may start here, but it leads to something else, which reminds them to go over here, and where men are saying, wait, I'm talking about the letter A. I can't get to B yet. Let's finish A, then I'll do B. They learned this. Again, my kids in school would do this. We would study a thing, and I'd say, now we're gonna have a test on it. They'd say, good, I'm done with it. And they'd set it aside. And I'd say, now we're gonna study this. And they would not make the connection between the first one, because they're done with that. And by the time they got to the end of the semester, they had all these little things that they had divided into separate little boxes. I can't, I'm sounding like Bergen now. I couldn't get that word out. Compartmentalized. These children would study this. The men who taught would make sure that they understood this. Now we're going to skip ahead. Let's go to the next proverb, or the next part of the Proverbs, chapter 9, verses 13 through 18. Is there anybody that would like to read this out?
Say 13 through 18.
13 through 18.
Hawley is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on the seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by to go straight on their way. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there. Her guests are deep in the realm of the dead.
Okay, there's a lot in there. What do we know about Lady Folly? She's a personification of foolishness, lack of wisdom. She's the antithesis. She's the opposite of Lady Wisdom. They're placed here in stark contrast: good versus evil, smart versus not so smart, etc. And we find those kind of comparisons throughout the Bible. She's loud, she's seductive, and knows nothing. A Bergen question might be, do you know anybody like that? Now, are you brave enough to mention their names? No. What do they mean by that she's loud? What's that intended to convey?
I like my version better, unruly.
Unruly?
There's the ignorant.
Hmm?
Maybe ignorant.
Ignorant? She's loud. I mean, Nora and I went to New York City one time. We happened to be there at St. Patrick's Day. And we decided we were going to go up in the Empire State Building. You can't believe how many drunk, loud, obnoxious, foolish people can get into an elevator riding all those floors all the way up to the top of the Empire State Building. We met every one of them. Because they were loud. They wanted to talk, they wanted to scream, they were just everything. It was just, we were glad to get out of the elevator. And by the way, we did look for a different elevator to go down on. She's seductive and she knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town. Now, any indication what that might mean to you? Why, in calling to all those who pass by who are going straight on their way?
I think it's sort of speaking of the temptation that we're always faced with. And like my mother used to always tell me that he thinks he stand, take heed lest he fall, because it's always possible, especially you can be going straight, sort of a straight and narrow on your way. But somebody says to you, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. There's always gonna be temptation.
And it's easier for her to be seductive and tempt people one-on-one. Calling out and saying, here I am. I mean, most people who are going to be like her don't go around usually with bullhorns saying, here I am, and I'm going to try and tempt you. You know, it's...
Because it always looks like they're having fun, and we're not.
Yes.
And I would say maybe it's not even that they go around with a bullhorn announcing it, but that because we don't come from as much of a place of knowledge, that we don't recognize it for what it is. And because we're not staying straight and strong on the narrow path, that at times people can fall into it, even unknowingly doing it as well, due to ignorance.
And that's the whole picture that's trying to be painted here. She's going to seduce these simple people, and again, what he does not know that the dead are there, that the guests are in the depths of Sheol, they're already dead. I don't want to get too personal, but when I was growing up, I started with a drinking problem. I started drinking vanilla extract when I was like in 6th grade because it had alcohol content. I'd buy some at the grocery store, and on the way to school, start drinking. By the time I was in high school, I was doing a lot of drinking. By the time I met my wife, one of the first things she had to do was come to the base hospital because I was put in there because I had been drinking so much. And I thought when I was with those people that it was a good time. I was having a lot of fun, but all I had was trouble. It took her saying, I will date you after church. You will come to church with me. And then afterward, we can go out and get a Coke. And I was used to saying, let's grab a 6-pack. And it was her father and her mother in their wisdom who said, come to church, read this, hear this, understand this, that got me to change. We were just talking about that the other day. I was just asking her, I wonder what it was that made me stop drinking. And the answer she said was, it was me. And it was. Because if I had not run into somebody like her, who would I have run into? Her. And it would have just kept on going forever and ever. And so, you know, that was a turning point in I can tell you from honest experience, that is not where you want to go. The people here, more often than not, are victims. The people who seek the wisdom are not victims. They've made a choice, and there's a difference between being a victim and not being a victim. This is somebody who allowed somebody to take advantage of them, whether it was peer pressure, groups, other individuals. They became a victim of those circumstances. The last part of that in bold print, both invitations sound alike at the beginning, so the hearer has to look deeper into the invitation's motives. And it's the same thing. We catch that in life all along. There are reasons. Well, one person, we've had realtors, for instance, tell us, let me sell your house, I'll do blah, 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 blah. And boy, they did not. I'm gonna waste a little bit of time here. We've had realtors, when we moved here to Lubbock, we were poor, as Nora would say, poor as Job's turkey. I never have understood that, but we were poor. We went to try to sell our house or buy a house, and the realtor was a member of the church. And they said, you need this much money down, and I did not have that much money. And he said, can I talk to my client outside for a little while? We went outside, and he said, you need this much money. I have that much money. Will you pay me back? I said, of course. And he said, we're not going to do a contract.